Have you ever seen those crazy videos online? The ones where a whole hillside covered in trees and houses just starts moving. It flows downhill like a giant slow-motion river of mud, swallowing everything in its path. Cars, roads, entire buildings, gone in a matter of minutes. It looks like something from a disaster movie, but it's 100% real. This is a landslide, and it's one of the most powerful and misunderstood forces of nature on the planet. Most of us living in cities or flat areas might think, well, that's sad, but it won't happen to me. But here's a shocking fact. Landslides are becoming more and more common all over the world, even in places they've never happened before. But the biggest surprise isn't where they happen, but how. What if I told you the most terrifying landslides don't always happen during a huge storm? They can happen on a perfectly sunny day, long after the rain has stopped, with almost no warning at all. How is that even possible? How can solid ground, the very thing we rely on to hold us up, suddenly turn into a liquid? Well, the secret lies in a simple science experiment you can do at home. Imagine a giant sponge like a hillside covered in soil and plants. When it rains, the sponge soaks up the water. But every sponge has a limit. Once it's completely full or saturated, any new water has nowhere to go. It starts to run off the surface, but more importantly, it fills every tiny gap between the soil particles, pushing them apart. This does two terrifying things. First, it makes the hillside incredibly heavy. Second, and this is the real killer, it acts like a lubricant. The friction, the stickiness that holds all that soil and rock together disappears. The ground is no longer a solid, it is now an unstable, heavy liquid mass just waiting for a final push like a small tremor, or even just the force of gravity itself to let go. In this video, we are going to deconstruct this incredible and dangerous phenomenon. We're going to show you one and the simple 3-ingredient recipe for a catastrophic landslide. 2. The secret warning signs the ground gives you before it collapses, things like drunken trees and mysterious cracks. 3. And the simple life-saving rules you need to know if you ever find yourself in a high-risk area. So if you're ready to become an expert on one of nature's most sudden and destructive forces, stick around. This is crucial knowledge for everyone. Here at Y-Zone 360, we turn scary things into smart knowledge. Let's get started. All right. So how do you create one of the most destructive forces on Earth? It's surprisingly simple. You only need 3 main ingredients. Think of it like baking a very, very dangerous cake. Ingredient 1, the tilted pan, a steep slope. This one's pretty obvious. You can't have a landslide on flat ground. You need a hill or a mountain. But here's the cool science part. Gravity is always pulling everything straight down. On a steep slope, that force gets split into 2. One part pulls the soil into the hill, holding it in place. The other, more dangerous part is constantly trying to pull the soil downhill parallel to the slope. This is called shear stress. Right now on hillsides all over the world, there's a constant invisible battle being fought between the force trying to pull the soil down and the force holding it together. For now, it's a stalemate. But we're about to add our next ingredient. Ingredient 2, the flour. Weak or loose soil. Not all ground is created equal. Solid bedrock is like a strong steel pan, it's not going anywhere. But most hillsides are covered in layers of looser material soil, clay, sand, and broken rock. This is our flour. Some types are more dangerous than others. For example, clay is incredibly tricky. When it's dry, it can be as hard as rock. But when it gets wet, it becomes extremely slippery. Have you ever tried to walk up a muddy hill? It's almost impossible, right? That's because the friction is gone. Tell us in the comments about the slipperiest surface you've ever walked on. So now we have our tilted pan and our flour. The hillside is stable, but vulnerable. It's waiting for the final critical ingredient that will turn it from a solid into a liquid. Ingredient number 3, the trigger. Water. This is the catalyst, the game changer. When heavy rain falls on a hillside, it does something far more dangerous than just making the ground wet. It seeps down deep into the soil. First, it adds an incredible amount of weight. A single cubic meter of dry soil can weigh over a ton. That same cubic meter, when saturated with water, can weigh almost 2 tons. Suddenly, the sheer stress, the force pulling everything downhill, gets a massive boost. But here's the real killer mechanism. As the water fills every tiny gap between the soil particles, it does something called increasing pore water pressure. Imagine trying to hold a handful of dry sand together. It's difficult, but possible. Now imagine that sand is soaking wet. It just flows through your fingers. The water has pushed all the sand grains apart, completely eliminating the friction that was holding them together, and this is the tipping point. The hillside is now a ticking time bomb. It has become a massive, heavy, unstable, semi-liquid mass. The glue that was holding it together is gone. The force pulling it downhill is now greater than the force holding it in place. The stalemate is over. Gravity has won, and all it needs now is a final tiny push. A small earthquake, a loud thunderclap, or even just one more drop of rain. So that's the recipe: slope soil and water. A simple combination that can unleash unimaginable power. But this isn't just a science lesson, this is a threat assessment. Because nature often gives us warning signs before the cake is fully baked. And in our next chapter, we'll show you the subtle clues that could save your life. Okay, so we know the recipe for a landslide is slope soil and a whole lot of water. That sounds terrifyingly common, right? So how come hillsides aren't collapsing all the time? The good news is a landslide rarely happens completely out of the blue. Nature is messy. Before a catastrophic failure, the ground almost always gives off subtle, hidden warning signs. Think of it like a car that's about to break down. It starts making weird noises, it starts leaking fluids, it doesn't drive straight. A hillside does the exact same thing. You just need to know what to look for. Today, you're going to become a landslide detective. Here are the clues. Clue 1. The ground is cracking. This is the most obvious but also the most easily dismissed clue. Before a major slide, new cracks may appear on driveways, sidewalks, or on the ground itself, especially at the top of a hill. They might look like small, insignificant cracks from the ground settling, but if they appear after a period of heavy rain, they are a huge red flag. It's a sign that the ground is starting to stretch and pull apart like a piece of fabric about to tear. Clue 2. Drunken trees and tilted fences. This is a really cool one. Look at the trees on a hillside. Are they all growing straight up? Or are some of them leaning at weird, unnatural angles, especially downhill? These are sometimes called drunken trees, and it means the ground beneath them is slowly, almost imperceptibly creeping downhill, and the trees are trying to correct themselves by growing back towards the sunlight. This is something you can actually spot in your own neighborhood if you live in a hilly area. Next time you're out for a walk, take a look at the trees and fences. Have you ever noticed any drunken trees? Let us know in the comments. It's a fascinating and slightly creepy thing to see. Clue 3. Water is behaving strangely. Water is the main culprit, so it often leaves clues. Look for new spring seeps or wet patches of ground appearing on a hillside where they've never been before. This means the ground is so saturated that water is literally being squeezed out like a wet sponge. An even more urgent sign is in nearby streams or creeks. If the water suddenly goes from clear to muddy, or if the water level suddenly rises or falls without any new rain, it could be a sign that a landslide has already started upstream and the debris is heading your way. Clue 4. The structure of your house is complaining. Your own house can be a sensitive instrument for detecting ground movement. Doors or windows that suddenly stick or jam for the first time could be a sign that the frame of your house is being warped by shifting ground. Look for new cracks in plaster, tile, brick, or foundations. Clue 5. The sound. This is the final, most immediate warning. Survivors of landslides often report hearing faint, unusual sounds right before the event, a faint rumbling, or a sound like trees cracking. This is the sound of the earth beginning to fail, of rocks grinding together deep underground. If you are in a high-risk area and you hear a sound like this, especially after heavy rain, it means you have seconds, not minutes, to react. So the clues are there. Cracks in the ground, drunken trees, strange water behavior, sticking doors, and faint rumbling sounds. Separately, they might seem like nothing. But together, especially after a period of intense rain, they form a clear and terrifying warning. They are nature's final attempt to tell you to get out. Recognizing these signs is a superpower. It's the ability to see a disaster before it happens. But what do you do once you've seen them? What is the life-saving action you must take? In our next chapter, we'll give you the official survival blueprint. Okay, you've become a landslide detective. You've spotted the clues, the cracks, the drunken trees, the strange rumbling. Your brain is now screaming at you that something is terribly wrong. What you do in the next few minutes or even seconds could be the most important decision of your life. This isn't a movie. There's no superhero coming to save you. Your survival depends on a clear, simple, and immediate plan. This is the landslide survival blueprint. We're going to break it down into two critical phases: before the slide and during the slide. Phase 1, before the slide, the preparation. The best way to survive a disaster is to not be there when it happens. This requires thinking ahead, especially if you live in a hilly or mountainous region. First, know your zone. Most governments and local authorities have hazard maps that show which areas are at high risk for landslides. Do your homework. Find out if your house, your workplace, or your children's school is in a danger zone. Knowledge is your first line of defense. Second, control the water. Remember, water is the #1 trigger. Make sure the storm drains and gutters around your property are clear. Direct any water from your roof or driveway away from the hillside, not towards it. Don't let your own house become the source of the problem. Third, have a plan. This is not something to figure out in a panic. Have an evacuation plan. Know the safest, quickest route to high stable ground. Have a go bag with essentials like water, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and a whistle. It might sound like overkill, but it's what separates survivors from statistics. Planning for an emergency can feel overwhelming. What's the one thing you always include in your personal emergency kit? Share your tips in the comments. You might just help someone else be better prepared. Phase 2, during the slide, the reaction. Okay, the worst case scenario is happening. You've heard the roar. You've seen the ground move. The time for preparation is over. The time for pure, instinctual, correct action is now. Rule number 1, and the only rule that truly matters: evacuate immediately. Do not hesitate, do not investigate, do not try to grab your belongings. The ground is moving at the speed of a running person or faster. You have seconds. Your only goal is to get out of the path of the debris flow. Which way do you run? Never run downhill. You cannot outrun it. Run to the side. Get to the highest, most stable ground you can find, as far away from the path of the slide as possible. What if you're trapped? What if you can't escape? This is a terrifying thought, but there is a last resort protocol. If you are caught in the flow, your priority is to protect your head and create an air pocket. Curl into a tight ball. Get into the fetal position. Protect your head with your arms. This is called the turtle position. It won't stop the force, but it gives you the best possible chance of surviving the initial impact and avoiding fatal head trauma. Once the movement stops, the debris can settle like concrete, so creating that small space for air is absolutely critical. And in our final chapter, we will look at some of the most shocking recent landslides to see these principles in terrifying real-world action. But to truly understand the human cost of a landslide, to feel the urgency of this threat, we must leave the world of diagrams and animations. We must journey to the front lines of these recent tragedies, where the principles we've discussed are written not in textbooks, but in the heartbreaking landscape of loss and survival. Our first case study takes us to Southeast Asia, a region that has recently been battered by a deadly combination of extreme weather and vulnerable geology. Look at this footage from the Philippines. It starts as just another rainy day. But this is not normal rain. This is the relentless torrential downpour of a tropical storm dumping months' worth of water in a matter of hours. Now let's analyze this like a detective. Ingredient 1, the steep slope. The village is nestled at the base of a beautiful but dangerously steep mountain. Ingredient 2, the weak soil. Decades of deforestation have stripped away the deep roots that once acted as a natural net holding the soil together. Ingredient 3, the trigger. The unprecedented rainfall. The sponge is now completely saturated. The warning signs were there. Local residents later reported hearing strange rumbling sounds for hours before the collapse. They noticed the streams, usually clear, had turned thick and muddy, but for many, these were just unfamiliar sounds in a terrifying storm. They didn't know they were listening to the mountain die. Then it happened. This is not a slow creep. This is an explosion. An entire section of the mountain liquefies and comes down not as a slide, but as a tidal wave of mud and rock moving at highway speeds. The video you are watching, captured by a terrified resident, shows the horrifying final moments of a community. There was no time to run. There was nowhere to go. It is a brutal demonstration of what happens when the recipe for disaster is complete. But this is not just a regional problem, it is a global one. Let's travel halfway across the world to the favelas built on the hillside surrounding Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Here the story is tragically similar, but with a different human element. The slopes are steep, the soil is weak, but the danger is amplified by uncontrolled urban sprawl. Houses are built one on top of another on ground that was never meant to support them. When the seasonal rains come, each house acts like a leaky faucet, channeling more and more water deep into the already unstable ground. And when one part of the hill fails, it creates a catastrophic domino effect. This isn't just a mudslide, it's an avalanche of homes, concrete, and human lives. The very structures people built for shelter become the instruments of their own destruction. These events are happening more and more frequently. We see them on the news, but they can often feel distant. So we have seen the recipe, we have learned the warning signs, and we have witnessed the real-world consequences. Now we come to the most important part of all. What can we do? How do we turn this terrifying knowledge into an actionable plan for survival? In our final part, we will build that plan step by step. We have journeyed through the science and the sorrow. We have seen how a peaceful green hillside can transform into a liquid monster. We have witnessed the heartbreaking real-world consequences when nature's subtle warnings are missed. To only feel fear after witnessing this is to have learned nothing. The true purpose of this knowledge is not to make you afraid of the mountains, but to empower you with the wisdom to live safely among them. This is not about fighting the unstoppable. This is about being intelligent enough to not be in its path.